Hi everyone. Solving equations part 2. First degree equations in one variable. A first degree equation is an equation that contains only one variable and the variable has an exponent of 1. Here are some examples. Notice that there's only one variable, x. It may appear on both sides, maybe in a fraction. If it's in a fraction, the variable is in the numerator, and there are no exponents on the variable, such as a 2 or a 3 or a -5. The exponent is always 1. Okay, so to solve first degree equations in one variable, we're going to use the following properties. The first one is the addition property of equality. If a equals b, then a plus c equals b plus c. That's just saying if you add c to one side, you have to add c to the other side. You've probably heard that before. Whatever you do to one side of the equals, you have to do to the other side of the equals. Then we have the subtraction property of equality. It's almost the same thing. Instead of adding a number, you're subtracting a number. So if a equals b, then a minus c equals b minus c. The next two, we have the multiplication property of equality and the division property of equality. Again, for the multiplication property, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So if you multiply by c on the left-hand side, you have to multiply by c on the right-hand side. You do have a condition, though, that c cannot equal 0. Right? Because if you multiply the left side and the right side by 0, everything's gone, and you get 0 equals 0. That doesn't help us. So we have a condition that c is not equal to 0. And then the last one, the division property of equality. If a equals b, then a over c equals b over c. Again, c cannot equal 0. So these are true for all real numbers a, b, and c, except for c equals 0 for the multiplication and division properties of equality. Okay, so these are the properties that we're going to use for these next examples. Here's our procedure for solving equations of the form ax plus b equals c. Step 1, use the addition or subtraction property of equality to get rid of b. And then step 2, we're going to use the multiplication or division property of equality to get rid of a. And in step 3, it says check the solution. The check always takes time. We'll do some checks. If I was doing homework, I probably wouldn't check most of them because it just takes so long. If I was taking a test, I definitely would check it because I want to make sure that I got the answer correct. Everybody makes mistakes. It's easy to make mistakes, so we're just making sure with a check if we have the right solution. There's also a note here that says there are two formats for solving equations, the horizontal method and the vertical method. This lesson will only show the vertical format. However, if you are comfortable with the horizontal format, there's no problem. I find that most people in the United States use the vertical format. Not everybody. Most other countries will use the horizontal format. So I find it to be true that most countries do math similarly, except the United States. I think we're the ones that like to do things a little bit different. Okay, here's our first problem. We're going to check this one. Solve and check. 4x plus 2 equals 22. So the first thing we do is to get rid of the 2. How do we do that? We subtract 2 on both sides. If we want to get rid of the 2, put the opposite underneath it. This is the subtraction property of equality. Subtract 2. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So first we're using either the addition or subtraction property of equality. In this case, it's the subtraction property of equality. Remember that we're trying to get the x by itself. Think about that x is at the center, and you're trying to peel off the layers around it. There's two numbers that are next to the x. There's the 4 and the 2. But if we're trying to get the layers off of something, we got to start with the outer layer. So that's why we were trying to get rid of the 2 first before the 4. It's a plus 2, so you put a minus 2 underneath it, and whatever you do to the left, you got to do on the right. So that leaves us with 4x equals 20. Now we need to get rid of the 4. The operation between the 4 and the x is multiplication. There is no dot written, but it is a multiplication problem. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to use the division property of equality, dividing by 4 on both sides. Now on the left-hand side, the 4's cancel. And we're only left with x. And on the right-hand side, we could divide 4 into 20, which is 5. So there's our answer, x equals 5. We'll do a check on this one. So a check means we take the original equation and we substitute the answer that we got for the variable. So we got x equals 5, so you're going to replace x with 5. So again, it's 4 times x, so you're going to do 4 times 5. And now we work out each side. On the right-hand side, it just stays 22. There's nothing to do there. But we're going to use the order of operations to work out the left-hand side. So 4 times 5 is 20. And then 20 plus 2 is 22. So our answer is correct. Okay, so that's how you do a check. You replace the variable with the answer that you got, and then you simplify each side separately. You don't use order of operations, you don't do the same steps that we solved the equation. You work out each side separately. So you would not subtract 2 on both sides like we did when we solved the equation. All right, let's do another. Okay, here's our next example. 15x minus 3 equals negative 13. We're trying to get x by itself, so we need to get rid of the 15 and the minus 3. The first thing we'll do is get rid of the minus 3 by adding 3 to both sides. So we first use the addition property of equality. Add 3 to the left side, add 3 to the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, the 3's cancel, and on the right-hand side, negative 13 plus 3 is negative 10. Right, the signs are different, so we subtract and keep the sign of the larger. On the left-hand side, we're just left with 15x. Now we're going to use the division property of equality, divide both sides by 15. On the left-hand side, the 15's cancel. On the right-hand side, 15 does not go into 10, but we can reduce it. What number goes into both 10 and 15? Right, that would be 5. So how many times does 5 go into 10? Twice, 2 times. How many times does 5 go into 15? 3 times. And if we can use a calculator, you can just type that into your calculator. Use your fraction button, 10 on top, 15 on the bottom. Don't forget the minus sign. Usually what we do is we put the minus sign, or the negative I should say, right in the middle of the fraction. So x equals negative 2/3. You definitely don't want to forget the negative sign. Okay, let's do the check. So what we're going to do is write down the original problem. We always go back to the original problem. I know it is a little bit of a pain. It's always good to practice a little bit. I wouldn't do it all the time because it takes It takes a while. But definitely know how to do it so you could do it on a test when you should. Okay, so here's our original problem. We're going to replace x with negative 2/3. So there it is. 15 times negative 2/3 minus 3 equals negative 13. We don't follow the same steps as we did when solving the equation. What we do is we work out each side separately using the order of operations. So on the right side, there's nothing to do because we have negative 13. But on the left side, we have multiplication and subtraction. So we're going to do the multiplication first. 15 times negative 2/3. That answer will be negative because a positive times a negative is negative. And you can use your calculator to multiply or reduce. 3 goes into 15 5 times. And then 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Bring down a minus 3. And then negative 10 minus 3 is negative 13. Since we have the same number on both sides, we're confident that our answer is correct. Okay, our next example. Negative 14 equals negative 3a minus 2. It does look backwards. The a is on the right-hand side. If you wanted to, you could rewrite the problem. You could put negative 3a minus 2 on the left-hand side and negative 14 on the right-hand side. It's called the symmetric property. I'll state that in a little bit. But I'm going to leave it as is right now. So the first thing we want to do to get a by itself is add 2 to both sides. 2 is being subtracted from a, so we want to do the opposite of subtraction, which is addition. If it was addition, then we would do subtraction. We always do the opposite when we're solving the equation. If there's multiplication, we divide, and if there's division, we multiply. Okay, so our first step is to add 2 to both sides. On the right-hand side, the 2's will cancel. Minus 2 plus 2 is 0. On the left-hand side, a negative 14 plus 2 is negative 12. When the signs are different, you subtract and keep the sign of the larger. When the signs are the same, you add and keep the signs. Okay, so on the left-hand side, negative 14 plus 2 is negative 12. Okay, so now we're going to use the division property of equality. In between the 3 and the a is a multiplication symbol. Multiplying. We don't put the dot, but there is a multiplication symbol there. So we're going to divide by negative 3 on both sides. On the right-hand side, the negative 3's will cancel. And on the on the left-hand side, divide. When you divide with 2 negatives, it is a positive. So when you're multiplying or dividing, 2 negatives is a positive, and 1 negative and 1 positive is a negative. Okay, so here's our answer. 4 equals a. That does look kind of weird, right? We want to rewrite it with the a first. So a equals 4. And that is called the symmetric property. If a equals b, then b equals a. Okay, here's our next example. We do have to do a check on this one, solve and check. X over 3 minus 12 equals negative 17. So first, we're going to use the addition property of equality. We want to get rid of the 12 first. 12 is being subtracted from x, so we're going to add 12 to both sides. 12's cancel on the left-hand side. Negative 17 plus 12 is negative 5. Okay, now we want to get rid of the 3. X is being divided by 3. So to get rid of it, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to multiply by 3. So multiply by 3 on both sides. On the left-hand side, the 3's cancel. And on the right-hand side, we simply need to multiply 5 times 3, which is 15, but it's a negative 5, and negative times a positive is a negative. So canceling the 3's on the left-hand side, that leaves us with x. And on the right-hand side, we got negative 15. Let's do our check. So we take the original problem. Remember, we always start with the original problem when we're doing a check. We're going to replace the x with negative 15. And now we're going to simplify. So negative 15 over 3 is negative 5. And then negative 5 minus 12, that's negative 17. Yeah, that wasn't too bad. Okay, so we're going to make it a little bit more complicated this time. We're going to be solving equations of the form ax plus b equals cx plus d. You can see what the issue is. We have x's on both sides. So here's our first step. We're going to use the addition or subtraction property of equality to get the variable on one side. So that's our first step. We do not want x on both sides. We only want x on one side. I prefer to try to get x on the left side, but I know in high school they didn't worry about which side to get x on. They wanted you to avoid a negative sign. And that's because you were afraid that you would forget the negative, but we are no longer afraid. So we will try to get x on the left-hand side. All right, so step 1, use the addition property or subtraction property of equality to get the variable on one side. And then we're going to do the same thing we did on the previous examples. Okay, so here's our first problem. Solve and check. We got to do the check again. 5x plus 3 equals 3x minus 9. So we want to get rid of the x on one side. You could either subtract 3x on both sides or subtract 5x on both sides. You would get the answer either way. I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides. Try to put the 3x underneath the 5x term because you can only add or subtract like terms. Okay, so on the left-hand side, 5x minus 3x, that would be 2x. And then bring everything else down. On the right-hand side, the 3x's cancel. So we're left with 2x plus 3 equals negative 9. Now that looks like the problems we were just doing. We're going to subtract 3 on both sides. On the left side, the 3's cancel. On the right-hand side, negative 9 and negative 3. If the signs are the same, you add the numbers and then keep the sign. So negative 9 and negative 3 gives us negative 12. So now we have 2x equals negative 12. Now we're going to get rid of the 2 by dividing by 2 on both sides. On the left side, we have just x, and on the right side, 2 goes into 12 6 times. It's a negative divided by a positive, which is negative. So as I go through these examples in the check, make sure you pause the video and try to work it out on your own if you can, and then play the video when you're ready. I'm sure you've already started doing that, pausing it and starting it again. Okay, let's do the check. We're going to start with the original equation, and we're going to replace x with negative 6. So on the left side, we're going to use order of operations. 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. So that's negative 30 plus 3. 3 times negative 6 is negative 18 on the right-hand side. And then bring down the minus 9. Now work out each side. Negative 30 plus 3 is negative 27, and negative 18 minus 9 is also negative 27. So we can feel confident in our answer that it's correct. Okay, one last example for this video. Very similar. You might want to pause the video and give it a shot. Just says solve, so we're not going to do a check on this one. Okay, so again, I like to get x on the left side, so I'm going to subtract 12x on both sides. If you want to subtract 2x on both sides, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, so subtract 12x on both sides. On the left side, 2x minus 12x is negative 10x. And then bring down everything else. Of course, on the right-hand side, the 12x's cancel. Now we're going to add 13 to both sides. The 13's cancel on the left. Bring down the negative 10x. 22 plus 13 is 35. Now divide by negative 10. On the left side, the negative 10's cancel. On the right-hand side, we have to reduce. 35 and 10, we could reduce by 5. 5 goes into 35 7 times. 5 goes into 10 twice. And then put the negative in the middle. You can change it to a mixed number. A mixed number would be 3 and 1/2. In algebra, we usually don't have to change it to a mixed number unless it's a word problem. The question was, how many hours does it take to get somewhere? You wouldn't want to leave 7/2 as your number of hours. You'd change it to 3.5. Of course, it doesn't make sense with a negative, but forget that. So if it's a word problem, change it to a mixed number, or if it's money, change it to a decimal. $3.50 makes more sense. But if it's simply an algebra problem, then leave it as an improper fraction. Okay, that's it. I'll see you here for the next video.